Well, hello, Patricia. I've been looking forward to chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. I'm really excited to geek out on attachment and, of course, all of the other incredible modalities that you offer. So, welcome and thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a little amazing journey of how we met because I remember I just messaged you on Instagram. Like I just found you on
Mm,
Instagram because you did Diane Paul Hiller's training.
mhm.
And I was like, I'm so curious about this work, but the training is quite pricey. So I just wanted to figure out like, is it worth it? And you were
Mm.
so kind on your reply. So this is how we got here. And I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mm. Well, and you're right. The sea of Instagram, it's always amazing how we find each other. And I'm so happy that you did reach out. So I'm always, yeah, really, it's like an honor to share the information and especially just to answer questions for people that are curious about kind of diving deeper into the path, which kind of leads me to my first question. I always just love to know what led folks to the work that they do. So that will be kind of the first question. I'm curious to know, how did you find yourself in this current work?
I think for a lot of us, it's through our own relationship issues. So this was definitely my journey where I went through a divorce.
Mm.
And then I looked back at my life, and I think up to that point, I was always pointing fingers where it was like it was that person's fault and this person was toxic, and all those things we say. And I had this moment where I paused and I thought, okay, it can't be the series of people. It must be something like I am the common denominator. This is the clue. So I need to have a look at what am I doing. And then I researched a lot, and then I found attachment theory. And it really
Mm.
touched me. I felt so seen in my whole life experience, my thinking patterns, my emotional way of being, and everything that I was experiencing in relationships. And it just all made so much sense. So then I really took a deep dive into this. And I actually read the attached book before I even got divorced.
Mm.
But I found the attached book didn't attachment. What is the attached? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the original work. And at that stage, there wasn't any healing solution for adults.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of ended with, if you have these insecure attachment styles, and especially the disorganized attachment style like I have,
Mm-hmm.
or
Me too.
had,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
um there's just no solution for you. You just have to find a secure person and be with them. So then I discarded that, but eventually I came to all the work that is available to us now, and especially through Thais Gibson, who is my
Mm.
teacher. And I absolutely love her work. And when I entered into my current relationship, the relationship was so beautiful. And for a year, I was just in this, this honeymoon phase. Our honeymoon phase just lasted this long, very long time.
Mm.
And then after a year, what I found is that I just stopped trusting him. And all of my trust wounds came up to the surface, and it was so difficult to deal with because I thought I could trust this person. I finally found somebody that I can trust. And the funniest thing is, like, when Matt and I met, he's actually got a tattoo on his arm that says always faithful. So I felt like he was really God sent, but then I stopped trusting him.
Yeah.
And then again, the search continued. So then when Thais launched a course, it was her first course. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this course. I'm going to take a really deep dive into the work,
Mm.
put in my all. And here we are. I did the relationship coaching course, and I'm now in practice doing this work. It's beautiful.
Mm. So beautiful. And I think it's true. You know, most of us don't come to this work because we've had great relationships or great, you know, childhoods or whatever, or absolutely no trauma. And so it's so beautiful to be able to put the pieces together that, you know, and humbling. Whoa, if this is my experience over and over and over again, then maybe it's time to take a look at me.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
was doing so much work on myself up to that
Mhm.
point. I'm a yoga teacher. I am a meditator. I did so much therapy, and I just couldn't understand, how can I do all this yoga and meditate and feel so calm, but then I'm in relationship and I'm just this completely different person. And it
Yeah.
was quite embarrassing for me because I felt like such a fraud, because here I am teaching yoga and how
Mm.
to calm your mind, but I cannot have or sustain a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really humbling, like you say.
Hmm. Yeah, it almost feels incongruent because I have
Yes.
a similar story about how I took my yoga teacher training back in 2011. And same, it was like certain elements of my life were just blossoming and flowering. I was getting to know my body in this whole other way. And then just the shits when it came to certain relationships and the way that I would feel inside, kind of
Mm.
almost like this, yeah, this quiver or this distrust or this, you know, this belief that I was just like never going to be in fulfilling relationships. And that didn't just like look like for me for partnerships, it was friendships too. You know, I couldn't understand why, you know, I would feel anxious in certain relationships and then completely detached from other ones. And so, and then within that, it was confusing. Like when I would, you know, fly off the handle or have a tough time understanding what was going on within, it would be confusing to the people around me. You know, I remember I had this one relationship where I had had this disagreement and it kind of just led me off into this tangent. And midway through the conversation, like I could literally feel me like leaving my body, like completely, like just
Wow.
whoosh, like, whoa, like where did I go? Kind of deer in headlights. So attachment and the wounding there can be pretty intense and pretty traumatizing.
Yeah, and it's really
Yeah.
puzzling to us,
Yeah.
people who do yoga or teach,
Hmm.
because we can become so embodied and
That's right.
connected, and we want to and we aspire to be peaceful and have good relationships. And it's really disheartening when you see this is not working. And this is why I'm so grateful for this work. And I'm so
Hmm.
passionate about sharing it. And I just want to share it far and wide. I just want everybody to know about it. A lot of the clients that I see are also yoga teachers
Yeah.
who
Yep.
are experiencing similar things.
Hmm.
And this is not to give yoga teachers a bad rap, it's just to emphasize how profoundly different and important this work is for a lot of us, for
Hmm.
everybody who has insecure attachment style.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And so, was that part of the journey that prompted you to start, you know, the Love and Thrive school and teaching all these different courses of how we can relate to each other?
Oh yeah, 100%. So I've had a Thrive Yoga Studio,
Mm.
and I kind of just came up with the slogan a very long time ago, together with we thrive. And it's always interesting at how we pick certain things, or certain paths already predestined and picked for us, how
Hmm.
I see it.
Yeah.
Because together we thrive, at that stage I was not a together person. I was most probably like this lone wolf, just living life by myself,
Hmm.
like trying to forge my own way, which a lot of fearful avoidance are. We're just like lone soldiers.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to actually work with people very well.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to work with community. I had this huge, big craving for community, but I just didn't know how to create that. And like you say, you know, those friendships, it was so difficult to form. Not that I didn't have any friends. I did
Yeah.
have very close friends, because fearful avoidants are quite charismatic, and we can establish friendships. However, it's like very few and far between, you know. And then when I finished relationship coaching, I just wanted to do something that combines both. So I wanted something that will also bring the yoga aspect in, because I do believe in embodiment and all of the practices of nervous system regulation, meditation, you know, gentle asana, or even intense asana in some cases, that the yoga postures. So I just wanted to combine everything and create a school that will take people from surviving to thriving.
Such a beautiful path, because I truly also believe that, you know, a lot of or all of our attachment wounds, they end up living in our nervous system, which is, you know, somatically, it can be how we feel it day to day. It can be, you know, a source of stability and calm, or it can be a source of chaos and dysregulation. And so I love combining those things, because intuitively, when we allow our bodies to move and shake and flow in different ways that maybe they're not accustomed to, in an asana practice, whether that be gentle or somewhat challenging. I was trained in Ashtanga, so it was mostly challenging. Mostly always
Love it,
challenging.
love it. You're a fearful avoidance. Yeah, of course. There
Of
has to
course.
be that, like, push, sweat it out, the challenge. Yes, all
That's
for
right.
it.
You know, all of that. And I think that you make an important point. When we have these wounds, it can make us feel very alone and like we don't know how to relate to our community, even though we're yearning for community. But it's almost like this, I don't want to say egoic, but in a way it is. Like for me, it was like, I can just do everything on my own. Like it's just
Yeah.
easier that way. And I didn't realize that that was coming from wounding. I thought I was just this like strong, independent woman before I knew any of this, you know? And so, but it got lonely. I was like, well, you know, same. Like I had a few very close friendships, but I was also yearning for more of a community effort, more of an ability to feel okay in certain situations with more safety within my relationships, to open up and feel vulnerable and to be able to say, like, I know these people and these people really know me, and feel like safe
Yes.
enough to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that comes from sharing our very vulnerable emotions and needs. And when we most fearful avoidance or even dismissive avoidance can have this hyper independent exterior,
Yeah.
and internally there is this loneliness and there is this craving and longing for connection, yet somehow it almost feels like there's this glass wall between me and another person. I can see it, it's almost there, but how do I connect? And also, how do I sustain and nourish that connection? I think this is something that has been on my mind a lot lately, is how do I nourish connections? Because if we were not nourished, if our emotional core was not nourished when we were growing up, we didn't learn how to do that. We didn't learn how to tend to relationships. So, you know, we can maybe establish a very cool friendship and then not be in touch with that person, and then just flip flop in and out of friendships as well, just like in relationships. So, and community also takes a lot of nourishment. Like, how do we do that? You know, and this is what I'm looking at as well now, is like, how can I nourish my community? How can I support them better? Whether it's the online community or the people in my life. So that's kind of the topic. And I think when we get to this place where we are nourishing ourselves, when we are connecting with our inner child and really holding space for our emotional experience, that we start to learn how to do that with others as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Experiencing it within first. Something
Yeah,
that,
like you said, in your nervous system. Yeah.
yeah, like something that we may never have learned. So that's what I love about this work is it is reparenting. We are 100% reparenting, and and there's nothing wrong with that. There are so many things that each of us just didn't learn because our parents didn't learn them, our caregivers, whoever was around us, And so there's actually no shame in that, people are just passing down the line what they know and then leaving out what they don't. And unfortunately, what that looks like over time is a lot of shit we don't end up knowing, or even like, how to repair. That's such a
Yes.
huge skill. It's a
Mm.
skill set that can be learned at any time in life. And it's not one that I possessed. And so now, like into my 40s, I'm like, oh, I know how to apologize now. I know how to like, take responsibility and ownership over the pain or the hurt that I've caused, or when I've passed someone's boundary or gone over someone's boundary. It's like so much easier because I know my own boundaries from this like inner work to be able to show up in a different way that's soothing to the other person as well as to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. And I think this is where we build that. It almost takes the pressure off
Mm-hmm.
of having to be perfect in relationships.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because then we know it's like, okay, we're not going to be perfect. We are going to mess up, and I know how to repair it. And of course, I'm not saying that we can be completely volatile and just go out there and do
Yeah.
whatever we want to do,
Of course.
or,
Yeah.
act on our triggers. We have to be mindful of that. And like you say, build up the skills. And I think this work is so beautiful because there are just a few facets to it.
Mm-hmm.
There is the body and the nervous system. There is the skill set building. And I think for a long time, I focused on how do we build up skills.
Mm.
So I used to teach mindfulness courses, very much based on like dialectical behavior therapy,
Yep.
DBT. So I love that work. It completely revolutionized my life.
Mm.
However, I found that it was so difficult to change my behavior.
Yeah.
And I saw this with people as well. It's like we learn skills, but what is standing in the way of us actually applying those skills?
Mm-hmm.
So then what I've noticed that as I studied and we took a deep dive into subconscious mind reprogramming, and we started to reprogram subconscious core wounds, that really shifted me. That shifted my thoughts, my feelings, and my behavior.
Mm.
So I really love the multidimensionality of this, right? Because on the one hand, what I love to work with is the nervous system and the embodiment practices and the breath, and then you have the emotional aspect, which is really like your emotional core, what I like to call it, or your inner child. And then we can work on the subconscious mind level as well. And when we have all of these components that we can bring together, then we really see change, because that's what we really want, right? We don't just want to talk about it. We don't just want to read about it, because all of this is just sinking into our conscious mind and it's not really making changes in our lives. And this is what I would really like people to understand, that you can read about attachment theory as much as you want and
Yeah.
know the patterns. And I think a lot of people can go like, but I know my patterns now. I'm anxiously preoccupied, or I'm dismissive avoidant, or I'm fearful avoidant, and things are not shifting. I'm still repeating the same patterns.
Yeah.
And it's because we have to make those shifts on a subconscious level, on our nervous system level, and learn how to do that. usually, preferably, right, with a professional who has walked the path, who has the tools. Because learning by yourself and like that hyper independence and trying to do it all by yourself from a book is really difficult. It's really, really difficult.
Yes. And it also doesn't necessarily lead to lasting change. You can, you know, keep on feeding the intellectual mind. Most of us are very good at that already, taking in information, but it is this idea of, you know, how do we execute? How do we actually approach ourselves and our people differently when we haven't embodied something, when we haven't rewired the subconscious? Like, I'm a huge fan of hypnotherapy and subconscious mind training. I've done that for years as well. And it's such a beautiful gift, because we're working, what you're speaking to is working with the holistic person, the whole person. There's so many elements, and it's like, how can these different elements come together and start having a conversation within us?
Yes.
Right? True embodiment. It's like, oh dang, like I understand this, but now I have this felt sense of this, and everything is coming together to support this new potential that wants to come forward. So I love that you're combining all of these things, because it's foundational in so many different ways, you know. And I think that, and I was going to ask you, this was going to be one of my other questions. It's like, you know, what are some common misconceptions about the work that you do? And like, you just named one of them. It's, I can just read attached, or like read any book on attachment, and because I know something, it means that, you know, that's all the work. That's it. And quite often that's not the case.
Yeah. And sometimes that can also lead to, again, just back to finger pointing. Yeah. And I think the poor dismissive avoidance really get it. If you look at the online forums, I feel like I just want to stand up for the dismissive avoidance and be like, guys, you don't understand them. They are just so misunderstood. Yes. And I know everybody says a fearful avoidant is such a difficult attachment style. And I get it, but I find that, to be honest with you, I find fearful avoidance really show up for the work. They're used to doing work. They're used to being challenged. They're very prepared to do the work. Where I find that sometimes dismissive avoidance, because of their fear of vulnerability, they will really struggle to even ask for help on this. So they will try to definitely do this by themselves. And it's such a pity, because not only when you work with somebody, you can get more tools, but also there is so much that heals in that coaching or therapeutic relationship. Because that's what we need. We need a relationship to show us what is a secure base. Because that's what our body is constantly changing and reacting to. And like what you say, you know, we want to embody this work. So when we have this felt sense of, oh, you know, maybe we had a little bit of a misattunement, and now we repaired that. Maybe, you know, like our appointments, or booking of our appointments didn't match, you know, the time zones or whatever. And then we corrected that, and there was safety. I was vulnerable, and somebody received it. And now that I have this felt sense in my body, I can go out into the world, and my nervous system and also my brain is scanning the environment for something completely different. There is this window of like, oh, this is an option. This is a possibility. Connection can feel good. And just not to leave out, I just want to also mention the anxious, preoccupied individuals. I don't want to leave them out of the conversation.
All our people.
And anxious, preoccupied individuals, I find as well, they tend to really focus so much on their partner that it is challenging for them to sit and do the work. And also just because they struggle with their own emotional reality, it's really, really difficult for them to sit and do the work by themselves, you know?
Yeah.
So I find like, yeah, fearful avoidance have a lot on their plates, you know, but at the same time, I feel like, oh, they've had it so tough and, and they're just used to doing so much work that it's not as, you know, it's got a different type of challenge to the other attachments.
Yeah.
So that's to add to your misconceptions, maybe.
Yeah, totally. I mean, how do we experience something different unless we have another human being, right? Human beings as the source of our pain a lot of times,
Yeah,
especially when we're speaking to attachment wounds, and they're also the source of our love and our joy
yeah,
and our connection. And so being able to orient to connection and having this, therapeutic relationship between you and a coach or you and a therapist or whatever that might be, someone that can just witness you, and be that secure base. I love that you're bringing attention to that because it's paramount to healing these things. We do these things together, you know. Otherwise, it just most of the time adds to more isolation, more, something's wrong with me. And it can continue to be, there's no hope in this. Or I've done all the things, not realizing that like we haven't actually tried all of the things.
exactly. Have you actually done the
That's
things,
right.
or
Have
did
you
you
done the
read
things?
about the things? Like, did you get
Yeah.
another label? You know, like we have all of these labels, and it could be just another label, and that's not what it should be at all. It is
Yeah.
a phase of life. I
Yeah.
believe like healing is a phase of life, and
Mhm.
then we want to move towards secure functioning, secure attachment, and that's what I really want people to know, that life on the other side is a lot sweeter.
Mhm.
There is just, I'm not saying I'm completely perfectly healed, but definitely having worked through some of those more stubborn patterns
Mhm.
and feeling more secure, being more secure within myself,
Yeah.
really changes your life on every single aspect. Like you say, it's not just relationships, it's your mental health, it's your physical health.
Yeah.
This is such a big thing. And this might be a little bit of like a sidetrack, but what I've found with some of the women who were healing their core wounds, their PMS begin to subside.
Mm. Mhm.
So our bodies are so linked to our emotions, to our thoughts. And, I'm so passionate also about like psychosomatics, like how does your mind and your body work together?
That's right.
And I see some people come to me with headaches or tummy aches at the beginning of the session, and we untangle some of those emotions. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's not there anymore. But I was going to go to the doctor to get a prescription because my tummy was sore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
You're speaking to such an important point, this like disconnection that we have between our animal bodies that like to do things in a certain way and like to move at a certain pace. And then our minds, which are often, when's it going to be done? Are we healed yet? Are we there
Yes.
yet? Are we there yet? Are we done yet? And quite often that results into handing over our power to other folks and I'm not saying that that's like we need other things. Obviously, we just talked
Mm-hmm.
about that. We need help in certain ways, but in certain places, a lot of these pains that we experience can be, taken back to a moment of hurt that is still circulating in the body and circulating in the mind. And once one can release, the other one has more space to kind of pull apart the issue to experience something different, whether that be relief from migraines, relief from PMS, which is, I'm so happy you brought that up because I've noticed this too in the majority of my clients, it's like when we start to do this work, they notice that their cycle starts to change and starts to even out. It's like, they don't have as much pain before, during, and
Yes.
after.
Yes.
And it's just like,
It's
of
so
course, it's all
mind-blowing.
connected. It's so mind blowing. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh, like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it's all because we were brave enough to go there and to allow someone to be there with us, to point out
Mm.
some things, to, challenge our beliefs that maybe we're not this. Maybe there's like a different potential that's waiting there for us on the other side of this. And it's miraculous. So I'm so happy that we're talking about this, all of the different body things that we can experience once we can allow for these old patterns to kind of work their way through, and then, dig into what's required to take the next step. So
Mm.
much
Yeah,
goodness.
and you touched on a very important point there as well. Is like when you're working with somebody, they can see your blind spots.
That's right. Yeah.
Because you can't.
No.
You just have this perception of how things are. And I was just working with a friend of mine today through one of her relationships, little upsets that she had. It didn't feel very little to her,
Mm-hmm.
but and I don't want to minimize it. Just use that word too much. So we were working together through this, and she completely didn't see the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we, like you say, with our belief systems, we can believe there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Or I am unloved.
Yeah.
And because we have this part of our brain that is like this filter, it's called the reticular activating system.
Mm-hmm.
And it just filters out information according to what I've already believed.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing like when I want to buy a red car. I go outside and I see, oh, there are so many red cars.
Mm-hmm.
The number of red cars in the world didn't change, but what actually changed is what am I paying attention to?
Yes.
And, when we can, and I love Diane's work on this as well, because she says, just as our nervous system is scanning for threats, can we also scan for the good things that are in our lives?
Mm-hmm.
Can we actually receive, excuse me, can we receive love? Can we receive care into our bodies?
Yeah. Yeah. So many golden nuggets there. Receiving. Oh my goodness. Receiving. So again, what we're speaking to is it's not just relationships, like it's a huge part of it, but receiving can be anything. Receiving help in any kind of way, asking for help in any kind of way, receiving more finances, receiving more, like it could literally be anything. And you can really start to notice over time the way that we actually push these things away. The very things that we say we want are the things that we're resisting. We're like, oh yeah, I want this. But, meanwhile, you're like, like doing one of these, because receiving is so foreign and can feel very scary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%, and I love how that links back to your nervous system, when we
Yes.
are in the rest and digest nervous system, then we can receive this breath, receive the love, even receive the food and nourishment that we are taking into our bodies. So many insecure, attached individuals have tummy issues.
Yep.
And that is just from being in this sympathetic overdrive, dysregulated, not knowing how to process our emotions.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful thing when we do find healing, because that affects everything, your physical health, mental health, relationships, everything benefits from it.
Yep. It's so true. And when we speak to digestion, like when we say, we allow this so that the body can digest something, we're actually speaking to a metabolic process that's like happening internally. So to be able to digest something, to not allocate all of our precious resources when we're in sympathetic, going to these extremities, it's like we can experience what it's like to sleep better.
Yeah.
What it's like to have moments where we can digest not just food, but information and the things that we're taking in, because we've now created more space for that to happen. So again, it's this multi-dimensional, multi-leveled way of healing. It's like you cannot have one without the other. One system affects the other, even though sometimes they can feel very separate, like they're operating all on their own accord. And I would go as far as to say that, the body is doing that. The body is the subconscious, and I speak to this a lot, especially when I'm explaining nervous system regulation and nervous system work. It's like sometimes, most times, if it's been years, decades, whatever length of time that we've been overriding our capacity. And so when I say, overriding our capacity, we have to do that for life. We've got to show up for work. We've got to show up for our family. We've got to show up for all of these things that our body doesn't always necessarily want to show up for, but it'll do it for us in service to us, right? Like it's in service to our survival, period. It's doing all this stuff inside that we just literally have no idea about. But now we have this technology, learning about the nervous system, learning about how to regulate and how it can be these active participants in this regulation, instead of just like allowing certain things to happen that feel, like we have absolutely no control over. There's like elements that we do. And I think that we're starting to access this, and we know like this much, like 1% of what our nervous systems are capable of, and so it's high time that we start to work with those systems in order to, oh my God, live so much freer, live in so much more connection. And so, yeah, again, I go off on rants because I get so passionate about it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I can just hear your passion, and I feel like I just need a session to ask you all the questions about how you work. But I think what really,
I feel the same with your work too.
Thank you. But I feel like what really struck a chord with me is this deep appreciation for the body. Having gone through an eating disorder, that consumed so much of my life, and this war that was going on between me and my body. And I think so many women or so many people even nowadays, can relate to that. And a lot of the time when we have this rift with our body is because it is carrying sensations and emotions that we really don't know what to do with. It is carrying unprocessed experiences. And then when we start to process that and find peace and regulation, then all of a sudden the relationship becomes so different. And the way you speak about the body is just like this deep reverence for the body, deep reverence for this very human experience and existence, which at a time was not available to me, not even available as an option. It was just like, oh, this body is just, in the way. And I tried to do so many things, like punishing the body for how I was feeling. And then going through the healing process and really healing my self-concept, healing some of these core wounds, it literally changed my body, my weight stabilized, the way I exercise stabilized. And I see this for so many people as well. They just come home so beautiful. It's just this like, oh, I've got this body for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be my own best friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think you're also touching on another important piece of this, is that when the body is in pain or inflamed, it can feel like a cage.
Yeah.
And I definitely have felt that. I journeyed with chronic pain for nearly 2 decades. And
Wow.
that was like, I remember a lot of times where, the pain would come on, because it wasn't every day, but it was, the better part of each month for a very long time. And I remember just feeling like so hopeless. Like I've tried so many things and I'm just in pain, and I didn't know how to experience anything but the pain. And so I numbed with alcohol and drugs and more punishment. You're right. This damn body,
Mm.
I'm
Yes.
just,
Yes.
I gotta get some relief. And those things,
Mm.
right, they're life-saving at times. Like I think, addictions, it's like you're doing a thing to help the body regulate, and then
Yeah.
the thing over time, it just becomes ingrained like everything else. We're teaching ourselves how to be in our bodies.
Mm.
And so all of those things can over time be healed and repatterned when we can, you know, look at things in a different way, when we can feel things in a different way,
Yeah.
and when we're little, like that activation that you speak to, it doesn't have anywhere to go, right? So when we're speaking to nervous systems and we're speaking to attachment wounds, when we're little, it's like we tend to turn everything back on ourselves, right? It's like, I like to use this example for the people that can see. It's like when little kids are trying to point at you, they actually point at themselves, if you've ever noticed this.
Mm.
And that's the way that, oftentimes we're taking things in. And so with that amount of activation, when we're witnessing, arguing parents or caregivers or horrific things or things that are inappropriate for our age, a lot of times that internalizes, and we just don't have an outlet for it. It's confusing. We don't have the brain capacity to process it. And so that's why it's our work as adults to go back and have a look at these things, because we do have more capacity. We do have more sovereignty. We do have the brain development to go back in and bear witness and allow for these really nightmarish things to have a place to go, And so, yeah, reparenting
Mm.
again, all the reparenting.
Reparenting, yeah,
Just
100%. I'm all for reparenting. But I'm just wondering, I've also walked my own journey with chronic pain, not for as long
mm,
as you had. I was in chronic pain for 4 years.
mm.
And I'm just wondering, what did you do to heal from it?
Yeah. So for me, it was a combination of things. So, one, working deeply with the grief that I was carrying and the pain that I was carrying from some traumatic childhood experiences, um, through somatics and through attachment, which is why I'm like so passionate about the work that I'm doing now. And then also through food. So
Yeah.
recognizing how nourishment, right? We speak to how trauma can affect the entire body and the nervous system. Food has the ability to do the same thing, right? And so working with different types of foods that activate, right? So we've got like caffeine, we've got chocolate, we've got all of these things. And like when I was really up here, I didn't need more of that. And when
Yeah.
I was really low, I also didn't need more of that. What I needed was more nutrient dense food, more foods that were calming to my system, more depressant foods, like the whole foods and all of these different things. And so I really started to, when I was working with the nervous system, I was really working with food as well. So I really had to take a look at what I was reaching for comfort, as opposed to like what I knew that potentially wasn't going to make me feel good after. So it was like a whole system. So working with those things in combination, but especially the nervous system work, because I finally had language. I was like, oh my God, like I didn't realize that this was a biological function. And it took all of the shame out of what I was experiencing. I was like, oh, like this is just natural. My body is doing a predictable thing to the amount of the weight that I've been carrying for, at that time, it was like 33 years. It's like my body is doing exactly what it's
Talking
supposed to
about the
do.
emotional weight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emotional weight
Yeah.
and just like, internal inflammation weight, and
The
so
heaviness of it. Yeah.
yeah, so it was kind of the whole of it, as you speak to, right? It was those things that I finally started to see change. I finally started to, oh my God, I do feel things other than pain. I started to notice my pinky. I was like, oh, like this is one part of my body that feels good. I started to notice the way my clothes felt on my body. I'm like, oh, that's pleasurable. What is pleasure? Right. Like I remember. And so it was through orienting to both, as we spoke to earlier, the pleasure and the pain, and being able to pendulate between those two states that allows us to tend to our capacity and to build capacity to perceive things in a different way. I hadn't been able to feel, or I thought I hadn't been able to feel from my throat down, but I was feeling a lot, only I was feeling tension and pain. And so I had to reteach my body how to feel good again. And so, that was a huge part of my healing. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think so many people go through pain, and I think a lot of people nowadays are addicted to pain medication.
Yeah.
And some of that pain, yes, of course, there's a reason for it, maybe a physiological reason for it. However, a lot of the time, chronic pain, there is this underlying emotional component to it. Because I know I've healed from my pain after seeing all the specialists. I've healed from my pain through journaling.
Yeah.
Journaling about my anger. And for me, it was anger and sadness and grief. Yeah. So there were just layers and layers and layers of it.
Yeah.
And I journaled I did John Sarno's work, where
Beautiful.
he talks about healing back pain. And I journaled every single day religiously for an hour in the morning and for an hour in the evening. After 4 years of being in chronic pain, as well as being a yoga teacher, I just wanted to move.
Yeah.
And the pain was like debilitating in almost every single day. And it feels so real. It feels so real. It doesn't feel emotional.
No.
But after having tried everything and nothing worked, I thought, okay, well, what am I losing for journaling? I can just do this and see if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I think within 3 weeks, my pain was gone.
So beautiful.
Yeah. After lots of tears, lots of tears, lots of anger releases, lots of tremor relief, lots of things. But yeah, the pain was gone, and it's still gone, And I love what you ended on is also changing our relationship to pleasure.
Huge. Yeah.
That is massive.
Yeah. And I mean, I think too, also what you're speaking to is like all of these tools are here for us, and they all work in different ways for different people. I also like, I dabble in journaling too. I think I did the artist way. And so I was just like really looking to get back into my creative self. And the process of just going through that workbook was like so mind boggling. It's like, oh, I can write out my thoughts every day and have my morning pages. And holy crap, was there a lot of stuff that's been going on in my mind through the course of the night that, like, in order to even start my day, it felt so much better to get that stuff out, even if I was just swearing on the page the entire time. So this, again, like I look at journaling, as though this connection to the mind and to the soma, like you're writing and you're crying and you're expressing and you're doing all of these things. The body's like, thank God, like someone's listening.
Yes.
There's a place for me here.
Yeah. And love what Diane also says, where she talks about how when you when you set yourself a time, I don't know if it was in her book or in one of the courses, but when you set a time for journaling, for your inner child or for your anxiety, for your pain, that stops flooding into other areas of your life.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is such a big challenge for a lot of people who experience anxiety or who experience PTSD, is that the past keeps on flooding
That's right.
into the present moment and overshadowing it. And however, you know, and we can often be very scared to even approach those emotional experiences, because we can think like, oh my gosh, if I start writing or if I start crying, I'm never going to stop crying.
Yeah.
I know when I started this work, but not the attachment work, but just overall my healing journey work many years ago, I didn't feel any emotions.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I could experience anger and some kind of like very manic joy at some stages, or like apathy, you know, like there were like 3 gears to my emotional emotional vehicle. And I was so terrified of emotions. And then, you know, so I can understand that when people are just starting their journey, it can feel terrifying, because our emotional experience was never contained, was never explained, was never reframed for us. So it feels like this hot potato. We're just trying to get away from it, you know, through social media, shopping online, maybe a little snack here and there, and sometimes relationships. You know, because the more I focus on somebody else, I can just lose myself in somebody else, and I don't have to focus on me. So eventually it does, I just want to say, you know, eventually you do become a lot more, the feeling of safety is there when we work with emotions. So emotions are not this scary monsters in the cupboard that we have to keep shut.
Right.
When we give them a voice, you know, and if we show up for those emotions and say you dedicate a period of time, like every day at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever it might be, in the morning, in the evening, wherever you have time, you dedicate a certain period of time, maybe not an hour, maybe you have 15 minutes, but you dedicate that time to giving your internal experience a voice. You don't only stop that past from flooding into the future, but you start to reparent, which which we all love, and you create that connection, that meeting point. And we need that consistency, that consistently tuning into what is it that I'm feeling. Because a lot of us are so tuned into our environment, you know, how do we protect against our environment, or how to cling to love and chase after love, but how do we connect back to ourselves in ways that are really authentic? Because I think we can also get on our yoga mat, and like a strong practice can really shift our energy, and I still love it. Like I still love a juicy vinyasa yoga practice.
Oh yes, me too.
But in a way it's not as connecting as writing and working with emotion in itself, and working also with our thoughts and starting to make sense out of that. And like you said, it can be just this emptying of this content that is already there. You know, it's already in your head. It's not like you can avoid it.
It's floating around regardless if we want it to be there or not.
Yeah, it's there whether you look at it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not.
What you're speaking to is something I like to call building self-trust. Like showing up for yourself. It's like, I'm gonna like I'm gonna take this 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is. It could be 2 minutes, and for these 2 minutes I'm just going to either write, or I'm gonna feel something, or whatever that looks like. I'm gonna take the time and make a commitment to myself and build that self-trust, this relationship that I have with myself. And what can happen with such a simple process like that is building basic trust that, you know, you've got you, and that no matter what comes to pass, you can still be with yourself and love yourself through it, regardless if that's huge amounts of joy, which can overwhelm people, or huge amounts of sadness, you know, when coupled with other events. And so, you know, making the time to show these past parts that they're in the present moment.
Mm.
You know, it's like anxiety, right? Can I show my anxiety my space? Have a look around. You're here. You know, maybe put a hand on that place where you feel it most in your body and show it your space, show it where you are now. You know, these practices of presence, of being in the moment where everything happens. So, yeah, all of these different things. I feel like we could jam out on this topic for probably days. And I would love to as well.
I love it. Yeah. And it's so, yeah, it can go in so many different directions, you know. And I think right now, when you speak about presence, and what a gift it is to be able to be present, more and more present. The more we heal, the more secure we become, the more present we become, and the more pleasure we are able to experience, the more enjoyment there is in our lives.
Yeah, I love that. Many years ago, when Eckhart Tolle's book, like I think it was Be Here Now, came out, I just remember thinking, because I had read it, and at the time, I'm pretty sure I was still experiencing a lot of pain. And I was like, oh my God, like who would want to be in this moment? And I reread it again recently. I think it was, you know, a couple of years ago or maybe even last year. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like it's really, he's touching on some very, very foundational pieces. As all,
Yeah.
like so many of the people that, like, you know, the wisdom holders and the wisdom keepers, and even in some yogic theory, you know, and talking about how, you know, being here is the way through, like learn how to be with your emotions. You have to master your mind. All of these things, everyone's kind of just speaking to the same thing. And I always find that very beautiful, trying to find language for like a biological process that perhaps we're aware of or maybe we're not. And I think that, you know, in past times, perhaps people were more connected to that felt sense. I don't know. I don't know for sure. But it seems as though they were speaking to the same kind of principles, you know, of being with the body and allowing the body to feel sensations and to feel feelings. But I feel like certain pieces of that puzzle were maybe missing or incomplete. And now, you know, in these times, we just have more of those pieces, and we'll continue to have more of those pieces as people grow more and learn more about like what's actually going on inside this mystery that is us.
Oh, I love that. The mystery that is us. Oh, that's so magnificent. I love that point, because there is so much wisdom in all of these texts. However, we are not always ready to receive it.
Right.
You know, they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
And in the past, what used to happen is we didn't just go to a yoga school and learn how to do yoga. We had to find a guru. We had to be accepted by the guru.
Yeah.
So the guru would screen individuals, and we would have to go through a very lengthy period of time to develop a certain quality of the mind to be given certain teachings.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us now, we read those teachings because it's accessible to us. And then we think we have to be at that point. We have to be at that point. And there's no way. And I think what we are seeing now is in the healing field is that we have to heal so much to get to that point where we are ready to be present with our experience, where we can observe sensation, respiration throughout the body. Because, you know, I'm a very avid Vipassana meditator. And I started that already in 2009. But the way I was experiencing my body in the meditation then was almost very traumatic.
Yeah. Yep.
To what I experience it now, which is a lot more loving and holding.
Yeah.
And I had to go through the healing journey of healing all of these different components, you know. And I think a lot of us can think that, oh, I'm just going to go and heal myself through a yoga retreat in India, or I'm going to heal myself through Vipassana. Not to say that Vipassana is not extremely healing. I think most of my knowledge and understanding of the human body and psyche is based on the Vipassana meditation, which is basically like this, for those people who don't know, is a meditation where we do observe respiration and we do body scans, and we stay present and we just observe without judgment. We're supposed to be equanimous with the pain, with all of the pleasure.
Anicca. Just like, oh God.
Yeah, and but it takes time, you know. I think for a lot of people who maybe have experienced these or try to learn all of these different spiritual practices, and you know, I always tell people, like, don't throw away the tools. You know, if you've learned some tool like tapping, you know, like EFT tapping, at a stage it was like, oh, this doesn't work, but then like 10 years down the line it can work for you. You know, like with hypnotherapy as well. Like I did that like over a decade ago. I did this hypnotherapy course and I was like, oh, this, and I went for sessions of hypnotherapy and I felt like, oh, this isn't really doing anything for me, you know?
Yeah.
Until I've learned different ways, you know, how to work with it in the body, and also how to work with the subconscious better and with the core wounds. And I'm just also wondering how your journey was with hypnotherapy and how do you apply it now?
I mean, it was very similar. And first, I just want to round back to what you were saying about experiencing something when there's a lot of stuff going on in your system, like Vipassana. And so I've spoken to this in the past because my partner and I took part in a Vipassana before before I was aware of any of the trauma that was circulating in my system. And it was a beautiful practice, you know, witnessing the breath, witnessing the body and its sensations. But man, like I was mostly just, I feel like numb and dissociated the entire time. And so although I did, like, I will never take back that time. It was a glorious time. And wow, like what a practice, what a beautiful, beautiful practice. But there were steps that needed to happen, you know, before I could get the full benefit, as you speak to, of that practice. Just like the EFT, just like, you know, I love, love, love the point you made about not throwing things out that you've learned, because we don't know. We don't know when these allies are going to come back around and assist us when we're ready, like being in the present moment. That's like what I teach now. Whereas before I was just like, what the hell? Like nobody wants to be there, you know? And so, I mean, it's a big part of what I teach now, you know, remembering that we're here now, not like back in the past or in the future. And so, yeah, with hypnotherapy, it was a similar thing. You know, like I would go into these deep states, and then even there was like a part of my mind that was like, we're not going there. And so a lot of the times it mostly just fell flat. You know, I would go in thinking I was going to have this big like healing thing like we do. It was just like, this is the thing that's going to fix me, which is a whole other topic. right? It's like, no, ain't no fixing, right? It's just like acknowledging. But yeah. And then, after I did the somatic work and the attachment work, I was much more, and I don't want to say easily influenced. I want to say I was much more open. I had more space to receive and to take in the medicine that is hypnotherapy. And so how I use it in my practice now looks different. I've got some like Marissa Peer, like old recordings that I pull out every once in a while. I have so many recordings of things that I'll pull out every once in a while, or maybe every night before I go to sleep, depending on what I'm needing that day. But I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I have this. I'm so glad that I can delve into this in a way that wasn't available to me in the past, so the beautiful tools. So I think that's
Yeah, and I
mostly, yeah.
also,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah. So I also noticed that guardedness
Mm-hmm.
with hypnotherapy.
Yeah,
It doesn't always work. We
that's
have
right.
to trust another human being
Yeah.
to go into those places with us.
Yes.
And we also have to trust ourselves, because a lot of us,
Mm-hmm.
if we are scared of the depths, like what is inside, what is
Mm-hmm.
lurking inside, if we have this like core wound of like, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me, then of course we're not going to want to explore.
Yeah.
So yeah, the healing really opens up these various possibilities for us to experience other healing modalities, which are, very, very powerful. And I love hypnotherapy now as well, because we can work and really tune into the body. I always come back to the body,
Mm-hmm.
and in my sessions, what I really like to do when somebody is experiencing, say, pain with a certain area, we go into that area, we can actually ask it questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like just mind blowing. Like you can literally speak to your liver, and you can speak to your gallbladder, your digestive system, and they all have a voice, and they all want you to know something. And maybe this sounds like completely crazy to
Mm-mm.
some people who are listening. However, it is just such a beautiful practice that I also felt like really helped me to settle into my body, to love my body, to understand my body. Like every single part of your body is alive. And like you say, it is living for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just have a lot of appreciation. We already went over this, so I'm not going to repeat.
But I mean, I love that you did repeat it, because I do want to repeat it more and more because it's true. It's an all truth. Our bodies are always living for us. Otherwise, we would not exist in
Yeah,
bodies. It's true
yeah.
100% of the time. If there's something that you can trust, it's like if you're alive, your body is living in service to you. So all the things, girl. I feel like we could probably riff out on hours more, but I'm just noticing the time. I want to keep going. So I think maybe like even a second episode with you would be really, really beautiful if we could line that up for another time. But
Yeah,
in
I'd love that.
so good. I just want to know, so for our listeners, what is the best way for our people to find you? How can they come and be a part of your world? And are there any courses or events that you're currently working on that you'd like people to know about?
Yes, so my website is the Love and Thrive School, just spelled out. I know it's a mouthful, but it is the loveandthriveschool.com. No funny symbols or anything like that, just the loveandthriveschool.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at the love dot. There's just basically a dot in between all the words at the dot love dot and dot thrive dot school.
I'll put that in the show notes, people.
Thank you. I'm also opening a YouTube channel because I find I really struggle with short form content, and I feel like creating content for social media is like a completely different beast on its own. So I really like chatting to people in a little bit of a longer period of time. I feel like I can provide more value. So I am building up my YouTube channel, which should be open most probably like mid-November. So people can also just find me there.
Wonderful. Well, same. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. It was so enlightening. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with me and with us today. And yeah, I just can't wait for us to have further conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My heart is so happy. Thanks to all the listeners as well.
Yeah, thank you, listeners. And bye for now.
Bye.
As always, thank you so much for listening. Life is busy, so it means even more to me that you are here. Listen, we've got so many great episodes coming up, so please make sure that you follow along on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you are listening. And if you appreciate these episodes, please do us a favor and leave a review and share the show with anyone you think this episode would benefit. See you again next week. Bye for now.